Hi, this is TJ,
And this is Mark.
and this is our third podcast on ranking the AEW roster month to month. This is for August 2022. This takes us all the way through Dynamite, the go home Dynamite before All Out, but this does not count Rampage or All Out since those are part of the September podcast.
So the first show we did came right off Forbidden Door. And this is the first time we're doing an episode that is leading up to. We have all the build to a pay-per-view, but we don't have any of the results yet.
All right, so let's start by talking about the biggest ups and downs. And we're going to kind of look at last month and this month to kind of see if we see any big ebb and flows for any specific talent one way or the other. But this month, our biggest climbs were Andrade, Ari Daivari, and Jamie Hayter. They're all up 43 points. Then you got Alex Reynolds and Preston, who are up 39, and Sky Blue, who's up 34. The big jumps, obviously, with the trios tournament, that's a big deal. So that's most of your jumps there. Hayter being in the four-way match at All Out for the title and having a Battle of the Belts showing against Rosa this month. Two title shots basically gonna boost you. And then Sky Blue fought for the AAA titles against Ty and Sammy with Dante. So, and then our falls for this month, you had Serena Deeb, who's down 68, Eddie's down 57 points, Willow's down 51, Nyla 47, Marina 45, and then Ruby 42. Most of the female talent on this list is just because they weren't on TV at all this month. Nyla, Marina, and Willow all had TV time last month. Serena was at the Ring of Honor pay-per-view last month. So they all had prominent spots versus this month, just, dark and elevation matches. Eddie's down, obviously, because of the suspension, didn't have much TV time after the beginning of the month, and Ruby fall out of the Blackpool Combat Club, Eddie Ortiz versus JAS stuff, it's just kind of dropping
And I
because of
think
that.
the ones that are up are just the opposite because they have TV time for the first time, really, except maybe Jamie Hayter, who's always been around but wasn't performing much.
Right. Well, I mean, look at our
Ari
big
Davari, Dark Order people, Sky Blue, they just haven't really been on TV much. So putting them on TV has really moved them up in our book.
right. Well, then if you look at last month's climbs, right, you had Anna Jake, she joined JAS, had a lot of TV time. Wardlow had quite a bit of time. That's when he won the TNT title, was at the beginning of July. Deeb, and then Mercedes Martinez, who isn't even on our list this month because they had that big build up for the Ring of Honor
Yeah.
pay-per-view, so it makes sense. And then, our big falls last month don't really coincide with, like, nobody had a big rebound month except for maybe Ortiz. Ortiz had a little bit of a rebound month, but again, it was just the fallout from the Blood and Guts match in June. Not everybody was in a prominent spot the following month. All right, so the new additions this month, we got some big new additions, some people that are back from injury.
This is our
That's
first time in 3 months that we get three of our top names actually coming back, which is huge.
Yeah, so obviously, Danielson's back from injury. He was back in July, but only had one match, so he didn't make our parameters for being taken into consideration. We had Punk back this month, and Kenny Omega. And then we also had the return of, Will Ospreay and Aussie Open for the trios tournament. We obviously haven't seen them since Forbidden Door. Cheetah is finally a new addition. Probably spending some time in Japan. Brain got signed. And then obviously Parker because of the tournament.
Trios tournament was big for a lot of these.
Yeah, same thing with Buddy Matthews returning from June, for the tournament. A lot of the additions. And then you have like wingmen and other people who normally maybe had a little bit of time on YouTube actually had some TV time this month, so it was easier to get on the list with that being said. But let's kind of go into our S and A tiers, right? So our S and A tiers this month, we only had 7 talent, so it's a small list. But go ahead, Mark. Let's talk about our S and A's.
We only picked two people again for S, which Moxley, of course, Moxley, I think, has been carrying this company for the last several months. And Jericho is pretty much the top heel of the program, even though he's not working with Moxley. And he's helping so much other stuff move along.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about it, Moxley was our number one last month. He was number 2 when we first started doing this. That's been his title reign through the summer, right?
Yeah.
The supposed to be summer of Punk has been the summer of John Moxley, and he's just been crushing it on all cylinders. Jericho's up a few spots. He had a title match against
Moxley.
Moxley. We also have a huge matchup with him and Bryan Danielson kind of fighting over Garcia to an extent, and then we had the return of Punk. So like there's a lot going on, but for our S's, Moxley and Jericho, they're the ones that have been around the entire month, kind of leading the ship from last month and trying to get us to all out,
And both of them. I mean,
Yeah.
several good matches and promos from it. And then on top of that, you have Jericho still doing commentary. I know that's an issue for some people, but I feel like Jericho is just so invested, especially lately, and it's paying off.
Absolutely. And then for our A's, we have Danielson coming in at 3, Punk at 4, Claudio at 5, Garcia at 6, and then we have the Acclaimed at 7 and Swerve and our Glory at 8. Not a big change month over month, up a spot, down a spot, nothing crazy, except for Acclaim's up about 11 spots. But I honestly think they're the hottest tag team in AEW right now. Belts or no belts, they seem to be on top of their game right
I was
now.
at the show last Wednesday for the first Dynamite in Chicago.
Okay.
And for the dark afterwards, they filmed. Yeah, Acclaimed is more over than Swerve in Our Glory. People truly love the Acclaim. People were up dancing and singing, and then it got so quiet for his rap. And you get the big oohs and ahs from that. But I think they're up because they're the challengers, the first big challengers, I would say, for Swerve. I mean, I know they fought Private Party, but this seems like a bigger deal.
For sure. Yeah.
And their first big pay-per-view match.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Private Party, it was a good match. Nothing against that match, but the Acclaim going into this, we're talking about, we're the most winning tag team in AEW history, which isn't something to scoff at. It's about time they get a shot. I know a lot of people wanted FTR to be in that spotlight. I think putting FTR and Swerve in Our Glory in a match, it's like a no-win situation. If FTR loses that, it's like, oh, you're wasting that situation. If Keith and Swerve lose that match, it's like, oh, you didn't give them a long enough title reign. So I think this is a good buffer until we get to that big FTR Swerve in Our Glory match,
And
whenever that happens.
I know it feels so long ago, but the Acclaim started the month with the dumpster match.
Right.
And then there was some more Ass Boys, Billy Gunn stuff that happened. And then it really picked up into the Acclaim versus Swerve in Their Glory for the pay-per-view build.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's kind of one of the things, we talk about a lot of give me a full story through the month. Like the reason there's so big of a swing on certain things is because once one feud's done, they disappear for 3 weeks. And it's like, okay, nothing's going to happen. Where with the Acclaim, like you said, they started the month with the dumpster match, which was a high, momentum. Then they kind of did a little bit more stuff at the Gun Club until Billy Gunn came back to, being daddy ass, and then right into a title match. So I mean, it's a huge month for them. And honestly, all out prediction, I don't know which way it's gonna go, but if the Acclaimed win that match, I'm not gonna be mad. Chicago's not gonna be mad. It's gonna be it's gonna be roaring in that building.
Acclaim wins. I don't think it's their time, but I think the crowd's gonna be definitely behind them at points. So I mean, it's kind of two faces going off against each other, which AEW does often, but it should be a fun match, and hopefully Max Caster has a great rap on the way to the ring. Someone we skipped over, like Garcia, is our number 6. And it's so weird because it's like, to me, Garcia's in the top story of the company right now, and he's not even on the pay-per-view. I'm fully expecting him to show up during the Jericho Bryan match, but Jericho and Bryan are just building this kid up so much, and he's not even in the pay-per-view card, but he still is a top guy on the show. He had that awesome match with Bryan a couple weeks ago, the two out of three falls. Yeah. And I mean, I fully expect at some point we're gonna get a Garcia Jericho match, and that should be a lot of fun. We'll see what he chooses to do on Sunday, if he wants to be a wrestler or stay a sports entertainer.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like I always looking at our list, like there's always like that one or two people that aren't we always have the big stars, right? Your CM Punks, your Bryan Danielsons in the top because they're in major storylines month to month. It makes sense, Bucks, Kenny, etc. We've had Wheeler last month and Garcia last month and this month in our top 10.
Yeah,
because there's TV time and they're put in a prominent role. When the chance of you're a wrestler coming through to Garcia, that's a big deal. You've put enough time and energy into somebody that, I don't want to say 2.0. Obviously there's injuries there, right? But coming out of Blood and Guts 2 months ago, you put a spotlight on Garcia and you've kept that spotlight going, and he feels like one of the top 10 talents in your company versus somebody like, I don't like I'd say, not trying to bash anybody, but like a 2.0, obviously, Matt Menard got the injury bug or whatever, but they're not in a
I
prominent light, so they're down quite a bit on our list because
and
there's
I
no
know we
time
love
invested.
2.0, like they're so fun, and
Yes,
watching Matt Menard during any interview is some of the best times of Dynamite.
sure.
But like, yes, I mean Garcia is definitely the future of the company. And I know people weren't necessarily happy when he joined JAS, and it just made him into a better performer. They're basically fighting over the custody of him, and he might have to choose what side he wants, and that might determine the outcome of the match.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think part of that too is, we talked about Yuta, even though he's not in our top 10 this month. They had a huge feud last month going into Ring of Honor for the Pure title. I heard there's a rematch in the works on that,
Yeah, next
so like,
Wednesday.
yeah, so if you have a rematch for that, those two guys, like, they're going to kill it. Like, it's crazy to think that that could be your main event of Dynamite with two people that aren't the marquee name, essentially, which is awesome that we're getting there with certain talent. We need to get there with more talent, but I'm completely cool with the fact that we're starting to see that with Yuta, Garcia, the Acclaimed. We're starting to see that build where you didn't need a name before AEW to be in a prominent spot, which is great.
Do we want to talk about some bees, or
We can, yeah. So, when we're looking at bees here,
see,
we
to
can go
me, just
through B.
looking at the bees really fast, it looks like a lot of the trios tournament people are around the bees.
Yeah.
Definitely Bucks and Omega. See, to me, Kenny performed two awesome matches, but he was literally on twice and had no promo time. Next month, probably going to be higher if he keeps up at this pace that he's already going.
Yeah, obviously All Out is tomorrow when we're recording this on the Saturday before, but we're gonna, there's a lot of like what if's gonna happen. Like, I think Kenny and the Bucks win that. They're gonna be in a prominent spot, and like seeing what comes out of this tournament and what they utilize those titles for, I think is gonna be massive. It's nice to see him kind of get back into his shoes. The first match, it was like, oh, can he go yet? Like, did he come back too early? My only gripe with that is you kind of did the same thing with Punk. Too many of the same
Yeah.
things on the same, like, if you had that happening at the top of the card and something like that happening towards the middle or bottom of the card, I don't think it'd bother me as much. But with it being the top two things, your championship and then your tournament to crown a new championship trios belt, and you're kind of doing the same story with Hangman too,
Oh,
because
I
he
was
has
just
to
going
be
to
a
mention
replicant.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind
Yeah.
of a little
The
bit
fake
too much.
injury, and then
Yeah.
obviously the real injury of Thunder Rosa. There's a lot of injury angles going on. And I
Yeah.
feel like you're playing into some of them, which is great, but really it sucks for 10. Like, I don't think he's injured.
No.
Not that I get it, without 10, Dark Order's not in the final. I mean, without Hangman, Dark Order's not in the final, but like, you just told a guy, hey, we're going to have you be injured. And I guess that's better than Evil Uno, who just got hit over the back with a crutch and he's totally out for the whole thing.
Sure. Well, and I know Preston is one of your
I
guys that you
I
always
want
want
him
to be
to,
higher.
yes.
Yeah, but it's funny because we talked about this prior, but like that whole promo with him and Uno with Andrade and Jose, when Andrade is like, "Oh, we'll take that mask off you. We'll do like
Yes,
that's
please.
everything that you've wanted." And I just, as soon as that promo
And,
started, all I could think about is like, this is March Dream.
and you know what? Like, peeking behind the curtain a little, while preparing for this, we were looking up old all out cards. And last year's, no, 2 years ago card, the pandemic card that happened, yeah, you had Brody Lee, but all of Dark Order was masked just about, right? Like,
Yeah.
you had more people in masks than not. John Silver was still in a mask at that time.
So
So
was
it's not
Alex
like,
Reynolds. Yeah.
yeah, so it's not like crazy that we demask them, but at this point, with Andrade teasing to unmask Penta all the time, let's actually unmask someone, and it might mean more.
Yeah, and maybe that's what they're leading to, right? Because he's unmasked Penta a couple times.
Yeah,
They did it to Dragon Lee after losing their trios match. Maybe they have a match against 10 and Uno and unmask 10 or unmask both of them. Like, I think 10, it could do something better for him, maybe not being in that mask.
see,
He's
10
not a bad
though
looking
is,
guy. I think it would help,
yeah,
his.
but 10 is seen outside of, I mean, he was in Road to the Top without a mask on and all that, where Uno, even when other people are filming vlogs, he has a mask on. So it's
Right.
like, one is okay with being unmasked for public to see, and the other one, it's still his character. So let's not unmask Uno, who wants to probably stay masked.
And then just kind of wrapping up some of those Bs, because I do want to hit something that was in the trios tournament, because we're going to go a little more in depth on that. I want to kind of bring up towards the bottom of our Bs, we have Darby Allin and Brody King, 18, 19 respectively. They had that coffin match at the beginning of the month. I know it's hard when we do this month to month look at thing, you're looking at 4 weeks of TV, something that happens the first week kind of like falls off your radar. But I kind of just wanted to put a little spotlight on that coffin match because that match was insane. Obviously, we're getting more of that at All Out. Darby and Brody aren't going to have what they had with the coffin match in that match because there's probably not going to be enough time.
And there could be a normal great match, but like when you have a match that's promoted as a named event, so like the coffin match or lights out match or 2 out of 3 falls match, it definitely, and on Dynamite more than if it was on Rampage, also the dumpster match, it definitely puts them higher. Like they are given the time to do a special type of match. Those guys delivered. I think fastest someone was bleeding on TV like at 30 seconds into the match. Insane. And it feels so long ago. It's only a month, 4 weeks, which is crazy.
But let's kind of dig into this trios tournament a little bit. So I personally didn't like some of the build to this. I've been pretty vocal with Mark and our group of friends about it. And I understand some of it, but I felt like there was a lot of teams that existed that could be trios that never had a chance in this, but then it felt like they were pulling stuff in, United Empire and
so
the Trustbuster
your
stuff.
big thing was to get, like, we could have done 16 teams and they could have easily filled 16 teams, a lot that don't have a chance of winning. I wonder how much of it was waiting for Kenny. They would have had to wait 1 less week, but I guess the other one would be United Empire. And maybe it's okay, we forego these other matches so we can get, the United Empire story. I mean, it paid off. It makes me want more of Kenny and Ospreay. So maybe that's why. But yeah, they could have really added more teams. Think about, even if they picked other champions to be in the tournament, there was no Blackpool Combat Club. I mean, I'm not going to name everyone that's not in it. Just something with Blackpool Combat Club versus the JAS team could have been pretty good.
Right. And I mean, you could work your way for the rest of the All Out card through that tournament. And I didn't think everything needed to be on TV, right? Like you could have done, especially with you having Battle of the Belts this month and a couple of other things where like you were taping Elevation and Dark prior to it, you could have very easily had some of that on there because the teams that weren't big here that didn't have like a presence like, Trustbusters, Dark Order, they did a lot of squash matches, trios matches. Even Death Triangle had squash trios matches on YouTube, so it made it feel credible for it. Just have a qualifier, and even if it is against, some enhancement talent that isn't signed to get into that match, it would have felt like more important than just kind of throwing 8 teams there, and I talked about this too. They had the Dynamite side of the bracket and the Rampage side of the bracket. The Rampage side of the bracket felt less than, unfortunately.
Well, the Rampage side of the bracket didn't even get entrances on TV, right? I mean,
right.
We skipped that. One was a live show also, so it's not like a tape show. They jammed so much into a Rampage, and it just seemed like Rampage side was a letdown compared to
well, I think it's one of those,
compared to any team on Dynamite side. I think could have been a champion, and maybe House of Black. I know they're going in this different direction. It makes sense. My initial thought is like, wow, the Rampage side is low. House of Black's winning it. And then when you start thinking about the Hangman story, it makes sense why they're going that route, but it does kind of feel like a letdown from the Rampage side.
Yeah, and I mean, you could have even had, out of that side of the bracket, you have House of Black, you have Trustbusters, Best Friends, and Dark Order. You could have had House of Black go up against Trustbusters or somebody else in that first round and make it to the second round, and it would have felt better because the fact that they lost in the first round didn't feel great. And maybe if you did it against Best Friends, Orange Cassidy, Chuck Taylor, and Trent, maybe it would have felt a little bit better. But when a Dark Order who isn't really on TV, it felt like they were getting, but Malachi got rolled up by Alex Reynolds.
So I think that's the problem, is how House of Black lost. And it wasn't just the roll up. It's Miro's music hits and Matthews and King are out of the ring. Like they got so distracted because they have to go after Miro, who he's been calling them out, but nothing has happened. Just let him keep calling out. Like it was so frustrating the way they got beat.
No, yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess the good out of this, right? I don't mind. I know a lot of people aren't a fan of the Trustbuster stuff. I don't mind it. This company needs more mid-card heel stuff. So
Yes.
having the Trust Busters exist is a good thing.
Oh, this was huge for the Trustbusters. I mean, they got showcases match going into it. They got which turned into a storyline of Sonny Kiss joining the Trustbusters. They've been building this story from dark, and it actually got moved to TV. And then this was huge for the Trustbusters. I know people aren't a fan. I'm just not a fan of the typical I pay money, I buy people.
Right.
We've done it with Matt Hardy. We've done it with Andrade. We've done it with Leo Rush, and now we're doing it again. And that drives me nuts. It makes sense in a way. I get it, but they came out of this huge. Now let's see if they continue to just be a mid card faction or if they're forgotten about for September. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we've been complaining for months about Sunny not having TV time, that you're gonna put her in ads about how for Pride Month and all this stuff, but you're not gonna give her TV time. So, I mean, not everybody watches Dark and Elevation. There's not many people that are going above and beyond and watching 2, 3, 4, 6 hours of AEW a week. Like, it's just not happening. So most of your audience isn't familiar, but then you're going to be like, oh, look at the great things we're doing. It worked for Bowens and it worked for Nyla because they were both on TV. So, of course, your audience knows them. And they don't know Sunny. It felt like, well, give Sunny the time then. Like, let your audience know Sunny. So I'm glad to see that that's happening.
But since the Trustbusters have lost, it doesn't look like they've done much more with any of them, including Sonny Kiss on TV.
Yeah, but
that makes sense, I guess. But.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. I've been complaining about how it's hard when you don't know the build to All Out. They're trying to cram everything in the last like week and a half, 2 weeks, which, we talked about off air. I think the reason that All Out didn't sell out is because anybody that was going to that doesn't live in Chicago that was going to travel is like, I don't know what the card's going to be. Do I pay for airfare on a holiday weekend? Do I buy the hotel on a holiday weekend for a card that may not deliver because I don't know what it's going to be? It's a hard pill to swallow because everything's extra expensive because it is Labor Day weekend.
And it's hard to fully judge because, like, a big part of this is the Mox versus Punk, where I know online it's been debated to death. Was it smart to do the 3-minute match or not? But, like, it's hard to debate it right now because we don't have the full story yet. Like,
yeah,
we're on the journey and there were some dips, but we have to see the end result.
Yeah, and I think part of that too is I wasn't a fan of that personally. Doing it on Dynamite, it felt like, especially because you have Triple H who's going creative in WWE currently, like it feels like there's a little bit more of like us versus them because there's a big transition in WWE. So it feels like, oh, maybe, like I said, nobody's watching 6 hours of AEW. Nobody's watching 6 hours of AEW and WWE combined. So, there might be a worry of losing a little bit of viewership. So it felt like a hot shot, like, oh, let's spike this Dynamite number. But with that being said, I think you kind of pull the rug under your championship match. I mean, granted, we're going back there. Let's see what happens on Sunday. But I really feel like you just kind of were like, well, we're just going to do this. Because then it was like, who knows what the main event's even going to be? If I was coming into town, I would definitely be like, is it worth me going? I told you as soon as they did the Punk Mox match, I was like, I'm kind of glad I'm not coming in.
But we hear this so much though. Like we heard it with Forbidden Door, with Okada being added so late, and that match with Jay White happening so late, and all these AEW cards deliver. So maybe they're trying to get some goodwill with it and hope fans know these cards deliver, even if we're late on telling you what the card is. But I feel like the whole Mox and Punk build could have went basically the same route, having the foot hurt and then him doubting himself and rallying the fans in Chicago for that babyface promo at the end without the 3-minute match. Maybe Mox is dropping the belt and he wanted to be the first 2-time champion and didn't want the interim champion to follow him around forever. Like, oh, you weren't really a 2-time champion.
Sure.
So maybe there's some politics with that backstage, and that's fine. So it's hard to know without the full story, and we might never get the behind the scenes story of what really happened with all the egos backstage.
Definitely. And I mean, it's fine. I mean, it is what it is. And you're not going to see the other side of it, right? But I mean, I think you have two really good talkers. You could have literally just had them talk their way to All Out. And I think people would have traveled for that match. I don't even mind doing the match on Dynamite, but then it was, we don't know what the main event is less than like 10 days from
Yes.
the pay-per-view. So you're not going to be able to like get those stragglers that live in Michigan or live in,
I
St.
know.
Louis that
But
are
I mean,
like,
I know I
screw
bought
it, I'll
my
drive in.
ticket two
Yeah,
months ago when they went on sale, maybe a month
right,
ago. For some reason, they've been putting things on sale very late. So,
right.
like, they could still deliver with it. The problem is we have two huge matches coming down to one came down to Friday with the trios tournament. Like, yeah, you know the direction, but like, it's still to be determined who it's going to face.
But yeah, I mean, all right, perfect example of the trios thing. We all know where it's leading with Hangman joining Dark Order, but we've known that that was kind of the plan when he told the Bucks no. And then you just keep Hangman off TV and he's not really doing anything, and then you have Punk call him out, which makes it look even worse that he's not doing anything until now.
I remember what I was going to say, and it kind
Okay.
of ties in with the Hangman thing. They are trying something different. You were right. They could have just done awesome promos week after week. I did love the we can't keep them apart. They have to fight now aspect of it because that would have been throughout the month for the rest of the show. So they are trying something new. And one huge positive is they're telling a story throughout an episode of Dynamite. It'll be three different segments that aren't in a row to tell this story. AEW doesn't do a lot of that. They don't do story that takes the whole episode of Dynamite to see. It's always just everyone gets their own segment and we move on. They are
Sure.
trying new things, and I do like the route they're going. I don't know if I'm more excited about this match because of the route they took.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm indifferent. I think I like doing that. I like them intertwining things throughout the show. Like, I think that is a good thing because, like you said, it's like, oh, everybody has their moment on Dynamite, or you have your moment on, and you have your moment on Rampage, and then Rampage feels crowded because they're trying to get them on both shows. Like, to have something kind of intertwined through in a different way is definitely better. But I mean, let's see if they do more of it. They could have done all that and then just had them do promos for the next 2 weeks because you have basically
Yeah.
you had the match and then you had the go home show. Like, you could have done
I know.
and you could have done it literally where not both of them are on the show. Where you said it's so hard to keep them apart, in Ohio, because they were in Ohio the match night. You would say, we told Punk to stay home so we can make sure that this match happens at All Out. Have Moxley
But
do his 5-minute promo burying Punk, and then do the same thing with Punk in Chicago on the go home.
But you could have even done they fight in Ohio, not a match, but they can't be kept apart, and that's where Punk's foot gives out on him, and now
Sure.
he's doubting all week long. It's doubting. You get that semi-retirement speech from him in Chicago, and Ace Steel comes out, slaps him around, swears, and the crowd just totally rallies behind Punk. You could have still told most of that story without that match. So I feel like maybe Mox did want to be champion, and because it's going to Punk, we said it. Mox has been A or S every time. He's
He's been
carrying this
our
company for the last several months, and he deserves. If that was his wish, maybe he does deserve that. So
you give it to
he's
him if
not
that's
being
what he has.
questioned. He's not being questioned as, oh, you were only champion once, when it was the summer of Mox, as you said.
So speaking of champions with injuries, let's kind of talk about the women's division and, Rosa having to vacate the title for an interim champion. I think it's a good thing that we're not just getting Storm Rosa at All Out.
Yeah, I was not happy about that because that was the match at Forbidden Door, and to do back-to-back Chicago pay-per-views 2 months later, same match. I do feel like they were building to probably maybe Britt join or something else happen. It really sucks. Rose is out, but this is the perfect time to shake up the women's division and give them more time, hopefully.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously we have Storm, Britt, Jamie Hayter, and Sheeta in the match. So let me ask you this. Who do you think is winning the belt? And then do you think it's the right choice?
I am still debating this. I know we always do our choices. I haven't given mine yet, but I'm leaning. It's, to me, Storm or Britt. I know a lot of people would not be happy with another Britt reign. I feel like if Britt's the champion, the women will definitely get more time. Hopefully that bleeds into other women, not just Britt. If we go with Storm, she'll be a good face champion, and I think we would get a Britt / Hater feud coming out of this. No matter what, the breakup should be happening soon. But if it's Storm that wins, I definitely think it's like two different ways we could be seeing more women's programs on our TV.
The two that I want to win this match are Hayter or Sheeta because I think that would elevate either of them. I hate that Sheeta wasn't really on TV this month.
Yeah.
And I mean, she's the perfect plug-in for Rosa for a four-way. Like, I'm not
I think
doubting
everyone
that.
has their best match with Sheeta.
Yeah, I think
But I
I
just
think
don't see Sheeta winning this.
yeah, I think like if you have to plug in somebody that's a face, Sheeta's your go-to. If you have to plug in somebody that's a heel in that roster, it's either Nyla or Deep. So like that's fine that's the route we went. But I want it to be Hater because I think that would just finally be like good on her. She always puts on good matches.
Yeah.
She has the TV time. But I'm with you. I think it's gonna go to Britt, and I think that gives more TV time to the division as a whole, which will be good. I just hope that they pick the right couple of feuds coming out of it, depending on how long Rosa's out before we go back to Rosa.
And I think that's the question of like Storm would be a great champion if Rosa comes back in 2 months, and that's the hope. But what if she's not ready in 2 months? What if it's 4 months? Do we just we can't plan right now for when she comes back? And I know there, you hear all about the heat and stuff, but my match of the year last year was Baker and Thunder Rosa. So like them coming back, having an ultimate show off could be a lot of fun too.
Yeah, and honestly, the way I look at some of that too is I don't want it if Rosa's coming back soon, I don't want it to be Storm because, like you said, we saw that match the last pay per view.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. It feels like we've been there, done that, and they're teaming together. Like it doesn't. Like that was when there was only two matches that were announced for the card, which neither of those matches exist anymore. I was like, oh, we're doing this again, and it's not anything against either talent, but it just felt like you're pushing them as a tag team, feud with somebody else, like bring somebody else into the spotlight, which
And
Britt does that.
speaking of injuries, like how we started this, I wonder where Statlander would have fit on this pay per view. Would she have been the one going against Jade? Because I mean, I do probably think that, but she could have been part of this top feud too. Like it's Statlander's time, and what a horrible time to go down for injury.
I would want Statlander to be in the title match. Then maybe that. I mean, if Rosa goes out and Statlander's clear, she's taking the Sheeta spot, like for sure. But I don't think like if it was Rosa still had the title, and it's like okay, who's going to go if it's not Storm? I don't think it's Statlander. Not because I don't think it's her time, but I think that she's so focused on like she's not been a part of anything that has to do with the women's title, just like with the TBS title stuff, which is fine. But that match has been Athena Jade. Like that match needed to happen 2 months ago. You know what I mean? So that's what they're going with. So I didn't think Stat fit in that. Like she fit in it fine for like, okay, Jade and some random baddie versus Athena and Stat, like that worked. But I didn't think Statlander was getting that shot against Jade in that regard. I don't know who beats Jade for the belt. I don't think it's Athena now. Although if Athena won that match, I'd be completely content with it. Like change it up, do something
needs
different.
To be losing soon, but I don't think Athena's the answer.
I mean, I was thinking Stat was the answer after Athena had her shot, but obviously that's out.
Yeah.
So do we go with Athena now or do we wait till Stat comes back? Oh, one of the women that's in both of our like top of the company is Ruby, who's not anywhere near any of this. I mean, she's doing some stuff with Ortiz and Guevara and Ty and like that.
She was injured for a while, but she's coming back and now is in the mixed tag team stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, think about when when the Ruby lost the TBS title to Jade, like at the beginning in that tournament. Everybody was like, how do you not put this on Ruby? And Ruby's like, guys, be patient, my time's coming. And now Jade is 36, 37 and 0, something ridiculous. Was your time really coming though? Because you haven't done anything. Like, and that's so unfortunate because I think they have the talent to have a great women's division if they put some time into the booking. And I'm not saying like, oh, they need to have one more match or anything like that. Like what they need is like to just build something that isn't Britt or Jade. Because I mean, we talked about it before when Serena was having her 5-minute matches on Rampage. When Serena became top against Rosa, we were like, this match is going to be awesome. You know, when they were doing even the Sheeta Deeb, none of that was for the title, but those matches, like we were like, let's go. You know what I mean? So I think that that's one of those things that they have the talent. They just need to go with it. But I did just bring up our top five. So like I wanted to do this exercise with you. And I think it's a cool thing. Like we did our rankings, right? But then I was like, all right, let's look at who we think are the top 5 faces and heels in each division, men's division, women's division, and the tag division, and kind of come up with our lists and see where they ranked based on how they're being utilized and see if we saw like any crazy moves in that stuff. So
And it was crazy, I think.
yeah.
It's we did the tag team a little different, but let's start with the women because we're still on that topic.
Yeah, for sure. So go ahead with your top 5. We'll split it face and then heel. So go with who your top 5
So
face women are.
neither one of us include Thunder Rosa because coming out of this month, she's not.
Yeah, we left people that are injured out of our thought process for sure.
So my top 5 is Tony Storm, Ruby Soho, Sheeta, Athena, and then Willow. And Willow is pretty far down our utilized list. To me, she fits in the top 5.
Yeah, but I mean, faces. so is Ruby. Ruby was ranked 66. I had the same 5. So mine, Storm, Ruby, Sheeta, Athena, Willow. We were both like Storm is the front runner here.
I think I read yours when I read mine.
You did, but all right. So Athena and Sheeta were swapped. So you have Athena third, Sheeta fourth. I had Sheeta third, Athena fourth. But still, I mean, we knew who the 5 women were, right? Like you're like, okay, here are the 5 that feel prominent enough to be like on the list. But I mean, think about it. It goes from 17, ranked 17 to rank 66, back to somewhere in the middle, and then drops all the way to 92 because Willow didn't even have any TV time this month. But we're both like, Willow is one of the most over faces they have. You know what I mean? So like, which is kind of nuts.
And Sheeta's above both of our 3 and 2s.
Yeah, so
it's just because she came in, she really landed 2 appearances.
Yeah, but she's in a title picture. Yeah, so we take that into consideration. Like, what are they doing currently? Yeah. All right, so let's talk about the top women heels. So go ahead with your list.
I have Britt at the top. No surprise there. Jade. And Jamie Hayter, Tay Conti, and Anna Jay. Anna Jay hasn't done much, but they gave her some more promo time this month in the JAS. So that's why she made my list. I know she didn't make yours.
Yeah, so I mean, they're similar, right? So I have Britt, obviously, number 1, Jade second. And then me and you have Ty and Hater switch because I have Ty as my third. Jamie is fourth. And then I have Nyla, but I think that's because Nyla's just that plug and play.
Yeah.
I would prefer to put Deeb there personally, but I also know that Nyla has more notoriety with the AEW audience than Deeb.
Both those picks are better picks than Anna Jay, but I just went with Anna. I think she's fallen since last month, but they were giving her main television story time this month.
For sure. And I mean, Anna, in your defense, Anna has more TV time than Nyla and Deeb combined because Nyla and Deeb were both not on TV at all this month. So it makes sense. Like your pick makes sense. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy that like, we know who the top 2 people are, and then like 3 and 4 are kind of mixed. And then, our bottom person seems to just be like so low on the card because they're not utilizing their talent properly. It sucks, but it's also something that it's like, if you like, perfect example, we have Ruby at 66 just because she had a couple mixed tag matches with Ortiz this month, nothing crazy. If you had her, let's say Britt wins the title and Ruby comes after her, you can skyrocket her. You know what I mean? Like, you can have her in something that means something again. I mean, even if you did it with Willow, even if you did like a small, doesn't have to be a long feud, but a feud with Willow, who's 92 on our list because she wasn't even on TV this month, it's going to feel important. You know what I mean? Like, we had Willow pretty high last month, I believe. Not super high, but she's down 51. So like broke the top 50.
Now, she did go to Japan for half of this month.
Okay.
So I do think that explains some of why she dropped off. You might still see her on the dark or something that was pre-taped.
Sure.
Like, I know she did go to Japan, and that was pretty big for her for the Princess tournament.
Makes sense. Okay. So I won't give as much hatred towards it. Makes sense.
Before we go to the men's and the men's tag, we did ours different. I included trios in my tags, and you did not. So like, this will be interesting because a lot of our picks don't match up, like how they just about matched up for the women.
Yeah, and I mean, we didn't really like talk about like anything specific in the sense of like what they need to be, like if it needs to be a trio or needs to be a tag or whatever. I went straight tags, thinking tag teams. Obviously, the trios tournament is a big deal right now, so you added trios to that, which makes sense because that's one of the most popular things. It's the tournaments coming to an end, it all out. But I'll go first this time. So my face tags, I have number 1 FTR, number 2 Acclaimed, Number 3, Swerve in Our Glory. Number 4, Lucha Brothers, and number 5, Young Bucks.
For my tags, I had Bucks and Omega as their number 1. I didn't include the trios. Then I had Swerve in Our Glory. They're champions. They've kind of been put on a rampage, but they're building a story for the pay-per-view. And then I went with the Acclaimed for the same reason. They had that dumpster match at the beginning of the month, and now they're building for the pay-per-view. FTR to me is pretty low because they haven't done much. They're in the trios match that Dak says he's really excited about, but I don't see it. And my last one for face was Best Friends.
Yeah, and so here's kind of like I think where the difference between our two lists are. Like you're looking at it like in this grand scheme of this month. Like
Yeah.
that's why FTR is so low. Where I'm looking at it in the sense of like what I feel are the most over teams, face or heel. Like the most like the teams that everybody's excited that might get a match, or like perfect example, like Swerve and Our Glory are the tag team champions. Say they were a heel team, right? Like Lucha Brothers against Swerve and Our Glory feels like it would be important. Young Bucks against Swerve and Our Glory feels like it would be important. You know what I mean? So I try to like keep it being like, okay, can these 5 teams, what are the top 5 teams that you can plug into a main storyline? Not necessarily for a title, but like into a main storyline, and will it feel meaningful? Like what are the top 5 teams you can maybe do that with? Is kind of the way I looked at it. And so like on my heel side, I have Andrade and Roosh, then I have 2.0, then Gun Club, then Butcher and Blade, and then Private Party.
And for me, I had United Empire with the trios, of course, House of Black, Andrade and Rouge, Gun Club, and Trustbusters.
Obviously, yours was very trios heavy. Makes sense, with the situation. But I mean, that's why I had, not looking at the trios, that's why I had Private Party, because they did actually have a title shot this month. Butcher Blade, like there's not a lot of heel tag teams. Like, so like once you drop out of like the top 5, outside of Andrade and Roosh, I guess, it kind of becomes very muddied on who would be a good opponent if you have a face team for like a bigger storyline. I mean, I guess you just did it recently with the Gun Club and the Acclaimed, but at the same time, like that elevated the Gun Club, but it didn't elevate them, to being like, I think they should be the next tag champs, or I think they should have
I personally thought we were
role.
going to get a 3-way tag match. Nothing against the Gun Club. I'm glad we're not. They've done a lot of 3-way tag matches.
Sure.
Not everyone needs to be on the pay-per-view. They're entertaining, but I'm glad it's just Acclaim versus Swerve in Our Glory for All Out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind the idea of Gun Club being part of this Stokely thing, whatever it ends up being. I do wish they would just kind of get on with it. It sucks that we don't have Ethan Page ranked this month, right? Like, because he's just disappeared after taking that card. Same thing with Lee Moriarty, disappeared after taking that card. I don't think we're going to see Gun Club until whatever happens. And, now you got Morrissey in there too. Granted, he wasn't on TV, but is he going to exist somewhere sometime soon? Or like how long until the Stokely thing finally comes together? I'm hoping sooner than later, because it just feels like the momentum you had at the beginning of being like, oh, what is Moriarty and Ethan Page going to do with Stokely?
Who? They're not even on our list this month.
Exactly. If they don't feel like they exist anymore. So I'm hoping they kind of wrap that stuff up quicker than sooner than later, I guess. Yeah.
So let's end with our top 5 men's heels and faces.
Okay.
Mox is number 1, is face of the company. And I think Punk is 2, Brian 3, Wardlow, and I went with Jungle Boy. None of those are really included into other aspects of the they're not included in my tag people, so that's Jungle Boy seems like a surprise, but like the Bucks and Omega I already had in the tag.
Yeah, and I mean we had very similar on like top 3 face, right? So I had Mox, Punk, and then Brian too, right? My difference there is that I have Claudio at 4. You have the TNT champion, I have the Ring of Honor champion. I mean, it's kind of like a mid-card champion.
Yeah.
Claudio's the world champion for Ring of Honor, but it's a different promotion, so it's kind of the same thing. And then I actually have Orange Cassidy as my number 5. And the reason I had, like, you probably have him more in like the best friend situation, where I had him as his own thing, because I don't think he sticks around after the tournament unless, they win the titles, because this is before Rampage, right? Like, unless they win the titles, I think it just becomes best friends is back to being a tag, and OC goes to doing whatever's next for OC.
I agree. And they really were kind of pushing that with going Orange Cassidy and the Best Friends take on Hangman Page and the Dark Order.
Yeah.
They really tried separating both of them from the real team.
Exactly. So that's why I don't feel like that's going to be a long-lived endeavor. Like they'll still like come out for each other or whatever and still be like kind of their stable, but Orange Cassidy's always going to be in something a little bit more prominent or important, I think.
And with my heels, I went Jericho, to me, top heel of the company. Christian, Powerhouse Hobbs, Jay Lethal, and Kip Sabian.
Yeah.
That was a stretch for me. I really couldn't think of another heel that was been in singles that aren't in the trios tag match, I guess.
I feel like after Jericho, it's
It's a big
hard.
fall off. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to figure out like obviously Jericho is the biggest deal in the company, with MJF not being around and Adam Cole being injured. All right, perfect example. Mox and Punk are both faces. Regardless who wins it all out, what is the
Yeah.
next feud? Like who, if they're both going to stay face regardless, I mean you can go Brian, you can go Claudio, but it won't feel as important if like you can't do two face versus face feuds in a row. I think you need to have somebody that like is the guy that everybody's against. And Jericho just had that with Moxley.
Yeah.
So you need to find somebody else. And I don't think that somebody else exists in the current roster. So for my heels, I had Jericho, then I had Jay Lethal, and then Sammy, then Christian, and then Andrade, thinking about him separate from everything else.
Yeah. And that's a good one.
And I was also kind of thinking like,